Hi everyone, how you guys doing? Welcome back to another episode of Podio Commentary. I'm your host Matt Jarbo, and once again, as this particular podcast starts figuring out how it wants to be, today we're going to be talking about 2021's kind of like big, massive, over-the-top comic book film, The Suicide Squad, James Gunn's redemption arc, some have said. I think I've potentially said that as well, although in my opinion, he had really nothing to be redeemed for. You may like that take or not like that take. That's okay. We can hash it out in the comments section. But anyway, you look at it, The Suicide Squad was probably like the seminal movie of the summer, the one that was going to make or break this HBO Max same day streaming situation. And well, that didn't necessarily happen. But you know what? We're going to get to that. So this is going to be a bit looser of a Podio commentary. I'm hoping that this particular approach works well for you guys because I just want to talk about movies and I just want to go through them and have a bit of fun. So if you don't know what the Suicide Squad is, I don't know what you're doing here, but if you do know, let me just kind of refresh your memory a little bit. So the Suicide Squad is a 2021 American superhero film based on DC Comics. By the way, I am pulling this from the Wikipedia, featuring the team Suicide Squad. Somebody wrote that, okay. So it's produced by DC Films, Atlas Entertainment, the Safran Company, and of course distributed by Warner Brothers Picture. This is a standalone sequel to Suicide Squad back from 2016. It's like not meant to be a reboot or a sequel. It just kind of is this thing that exists without any real rhyme or reason, apparently. And this one was written and directed by James Gunn. Obviously, this is the movie everyone's been waiting for before we all get Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. But like I said, we will get to that here. The plot of the film is very simple, right? Supervillains, Harley Quinn, Bloodsport, Peacemaker, and a collection of nutty cons at Belle Reve Prison join the super secret shady Task Force X as they are dropped off in the remote enemy-infused island of Corto Maltese. That is the IMDb description of the movie. I think that's a pretty fair and apt description of the film. I mean, obviously it leaves a lot out, but you know, you don't want to spoil everything going right into it. Although maybe you do. I don't know, maybe the first trailer showing off Starro the Conqueror might have been a little bit of a giveaway. However, that's all right. That's okay. The stars of the movie are once again Margot Robbie returning as Harley Quinn, Joel Kinnaman as Rick Flag. You know, you've got Jai Courtney as Captain Boomerang, Idris Elba as Bloodsport, David Dastmalchian as Polka Dot Man, the surprising goat of the film. Well, one of the two goats. Sylvester Stallone as the voice of Nanawe, a.k.a. King Shark, and Daniela Melchior, if I'm pronouncing that incorrectly, I apologize, as Ratcatcher Dose, and then John Cena himself as Peacemaker, which is a character that a lot of people out there either like or they hate. It is up to you, obviously. I'll be getting more of my thoughts on him towards the end of this thing. But look, when it comes to this movie specifically, I think the thing people need to realize is that like a lot kind of went into the development of this film before James Gunn even got on board. And I mean, like, not that any of it ended up making its way to the screen, but it does have a bit of a history. So the development for this movie actually began before the release of Suicide Squad back in August 2016. And back then, David Ayer was set to direct, and Will Smith was expected to return as Deadshot. They were going to start filming that movie in 2017 after completing their work for the Netflix movie Bright. And a month later, so in September of 2016, Ayer came out and said that the reason why Suicide Squad was rated PG-13 was because that was a studio mandate. They didn't want it to be rated R. They wanted it to be PG-13. And he felt that he wanted an R-rated production from the start. He would be lobbying for an R-rated sequel, as he felt the first film had the edge and the attitude of an R-rated film already. But again, it's that money is kind of the factor here. You know, the 700 some odd million that the first movie made from being PG-13 and accessible to all audiences might have actually hurt that movie here. And when we get to the how much money it made, oh my God. But in December of 2017, things got a little bit crazier because this is where Warner Brothers was basically doing what Warner Brothers likes to do. And they really love to just kind of over expand things a little bit quickly because they already had several spin-offs in development at that time. That was including one with Will Smith as Deadshot. They had another one that was Gotham City Sirens that Margot Robbie had planned to star in. That was also the one that was rumored to have Catwoman and Poison Ivy, and everybody was wanting that one. Ayer was set to produce and direct that film at the time, and then that never materialized. A year later, in September of 2017, Gavin O'Connor, who did The Accountant, was chosen to direct the film and co-write it, and this was based on his own vision for the film. They had actually wanted to include Black Adam as the main villain of this script because Dwayne Johnson was already attached to that role for DC Films. You got to remember, The Rock was attached to the role of Black Adam for like an insane amount of time, before like a decade or something, before they even went to film this movie that is coming out next year. So getting him in at some point in time was probably for the best. It just didn't happen here. Then it was October, I believe, of 2018 when Gavin O'Connor left the film, a whole year gone of working on this movie, and he just left. And the reason why he left, according to a report, is that he left out of frustration with Warner Brothers. Gee, I wonder if that's an ongoing thing. And this had a lot to do with the newly announced Birds of Prey movie, the single standalone Harley Quinn film, which, according to Gavin O'Connor, had a very similar storyline to the one he wrote for Suicide Squad 2. I don't quite know what about that would have been similar. I would love to know the details on that, but obviously I probably would have preferred his version of Suicide Squad 2 rather than what we got with Birds of Prey. It's not that Birds of Prey was a horrible movie. It wasn't that great of a film, and I think people need to kind of come to terms with that, to be honest with you. So then we get into probably a little bit of the crazier stuff here, and that, of course, is James Gunn. So what you got to remember is that in July 2018, James Gunn's career had come to a near end, right? It had come to this near end when Disney fired him over old tweets that were really terrible in hindsight. Clearly dark humor, clearly not who he is as a person, but that didn't matter. Cancel culture is outright fascism in many instances, and this was dug up and used by right-wing radicals. Obviously, like I mentioned, fascism. A few months after this, though, this is when James was actually hired by Warner Brothers to write and direct the new film. I guess they had actually been trying to court him like the day after he was fired. They tried courting him to come on in and make a movie. And they had offered him Superman, but he really wanted to tackle the Suicide Squad because he says that, they told him, look, he could adapt any project he wanted. And he wanted Suicide Squad because that was the one he had dreamed of adapting the most. And he had been jealous when Ayer's movie actually performed pretty well. The funny thing with the Suicide Squad is it actually performed very much on point or on par with James's Guardians of the Galaxy. They both did in the low 700 million range. And so DC probably thought that after Guardians 2, hey, this would probably be a good payday for us. You know what? Hey, no one knew what COVID was at the time, obviously. Gavin O'Connor was gone. They needed someone to take over the role. Gunn wanted to take the role. And when he reached out to David Ayer about it, David Ayer was cool with him taking over the project and still is to this day. He is very supportive on social media. Funny thing was, the day after Gunn was hired by DC to direct the Suicide Squad, there was a report that Disney had magically rehired him for Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. This was a bit of a slap in the face to like a lot of fans, I think. I myself included, as much as I love James Gunn, as much as I supported James Gunn, the big thing for me was that I kind of feel like there was a lot of manipulation with that in the media. And there was a lot of things going on behind the scenes that Gunn knew about but couldn't talk about, which obviously does make like the most amount of sense. But it still felt like a bit of a slap in the face, predominantly because you're like, hey, man, like, what the hell's going on here? It just felt crazy. But now that's all, again, like water over the dam or water under the bridge, however you want to describe it. The movie's already been out. We've already seen it. I think it's going to be hitting home video here in like the next month. So like I said, Warner Brothers gave him carte blanche to do basically like whatever he wanted to do. And they said he could take or leave any elements that he wanted from the first film. But they were really kind of going like, hey, would you mind Would you mind like bringing back Margot Robbie as Harley Quinn? We really want to build franchises around Margot Robbie as Harley Quinn. Here's another little side piece of information for you. Generally speaking, and I could be this, I don't think this is outdated information, but when it comes to merchandising for Warner Brothers, at least for DC, it's Batman and then it's Harley Quinn. So Batman number one, Harley Quinn number two. That's why they wanted to keep her around, as she was a major, major draw for the first film. He kept not only her, but he wanted to bring back Viola Davis as Amanda Waller, who, in my opinion, is just glorious in that role. And, there were things also that were in Ayer's movie that Gunn loved, and he defended the casting choices. But at the end, he only really chose to bring back Rick Flag, Margot Robbie, Viola Davis, and Jai Courtney for a hot minute, which was pretty sad. But when it came to the actual storyline itself and the ragtag group of miscreants that were going to be, going on this mission, he did take inspiration from John Ostrander's original 1980s run of Suicide Squad comics. And he described this script as more of a sequel in the same vein of those comics rather than an adaptation. He was drawn to that take because it was about a bunch of loser B-grade supervillains and felt encouraged to find the best characters for his story, even if a lot of them are losers. And I think, look, if I'm being honest with you, I think at the time, his particular mindset, where he was coming off of that situation with Disney, coming off of the firing and how big it was and how it blew up and everything else, I would argue that it's probably pretty, there's probably a pretty good amount there to look at and go, yeah, he was writing this as a bit of a redemption on his end. He was writing this from his perspective. He wanted to find like the most useless loser characters in DC's villain lineup and then maybe put himself in their shoes and try to find a way to redeem them, which is why I think Polka Dot Man turned out the way that he did, because it's possible that that was a bit of a self-insert. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know, but it's kind of my take on it now. Anyway, a lot of people were wondering what was going on with the Joker, right? What was going to be happening with Jared Leto and the Joker, and whether or not we were going to see him pop back up, because there was a lot going on at the time. Warner Brothers had offered Jared Leto his own film. There was a rumored Joker and Harley spinoff movie. There was a lot going on with Jared Leto's Joker. And of course, that got kind of, usurped by the Joaquin Phoenix movie, which apparently, and this is true, Jared Leto tried to kill that movie because of his deal with Warner Brothers and because of everything he was trying to do with that character. It wasn't until the Snyder Cut a couple years later where people got to see Jared Leto again, and there was a renewed interest in the Joker. And it is entirely possible to have Joker popped up in either Birds of Prey or the Suicide Squad. It maybe would have actually found a different audience, and maybe a more appreciative audience in regards to, money. But then again, no one can really predict the outcome of the pandemic. So when it came to the principal photography of this movie, it started September 20th, 2019 at Pinewood Atlanta Studios, where it shot for 3 months, and then it moved down to Panama in order to film for the final month, where it did wrap up production on February 28th, 2020, literally days before COVID started to shut everything down. And during the production of this film, Gunn took a lot of precautions to try to avoid details coming out about it, such as referring to Bloodsport as the vigilante to prevent his actual role from being revealed, and to not give some actors their pages until after their character's death. Yeah, it was a weird thing like that. I think one of the things with Bloodsport was, I think they were toying with him being Deadshot for a while, because there was, when Will Smith wasn't able to be in it, they went to Idris Elba. Idris Elba kind of signed on sight unseen because he wanted to work with Gunn. Gunn wanted to work with Elba. Gunn apparently wrote the role of Bloodsport for Elba, but there were elements of it that were clearly Deadshot. The whole thing with the daughter was clearly Deadshot. It was just that part wasn't changed. Perhaps it should have been, but Idris Elba knocked it out of the park, in my opinion, and so I'm totally okay with that. But I do find it to be pretty funny that there was a lot of speculation that he was in fact Deadshot until we saw like the first trailer of DC fandom like last year. But when it came to wrapping this thing up, then the film decided to go into the editing phase. In fact, it actually wasn't set to come out until 2021 anyway, but the film had actually been fully finished by February of 2021. And Gunn said that Warner Brothers had not interfered with his vision for the movie and had only given a few minor notes on it, which is like the exact opposite of what Zack Snyder had to deal with, which is why a lot of the Snyder Cut fans were really angry at James Gunn when he said that. It made no sense to me, just as like a fan perspective, like why they would be upset about that. You figure this guy, they learned from their mistakes maybe, or they just trusted him. You want them to give it to their auteurs. You want them to leave them alone, but you're upset that this guy got freedom. It's when the other guy didn't, but that was like 4 years ago. It's a mess. It's a whole bunch of ego. It's a whole bunch of a mess situation. And of course, there's competition. Doesn't need to be competition, but there's competition nonetheless. So he did say, this is Gunn here, says that he added that the Suicide Squad was the most fun he had had making a movie, which he admitted to prioritizing creativity over perfectionism and being in the best place mentally and emotionally of his career, having a stupendous cast and crew and supportive studio, and feeling that he was at the height of his directing abilities with the movie. And again, looking at what happened in the summer of 2018, looking at how much of a hit he took professionally and personally, how many people out there came to his defense versus how many of those out there were calling for his head on a spike. This was something that he needed. He needed to kind of, shake off the yips in order to come back and make something I think that's going to be as good as Guardians of the Galaxy. It's not to say that I feel like this was a stepping stone movie. I feel he gave it his all, even if some of it does feel a little bit disjointed from time to time and maybe not as fast paced as you would like. But then again, the more you watch this movie, the more I think you come to kind of just appreciate exactly what it is. So like I said, when it comes to the film release, and of course, due to COVID-19 shutdowns, Warner Brothers announced, this was back in December of 2020, that its entire 2021 slate was going to be premiering on HBO Max as well as theaters day and date. It started with Wonder Woman 1984 on Christmas Day 2020, and even though James Gunn hated the idea, he hated the idea of doing this. He did not like it one bit. He didn't have any real say in it, but the Suicide Squad did release on HBO Max here in the United States and on theaters on August 5th, which also happens to be James Gunn's birthday. Although there were already a buttload of spoilers online because, hey, what do you know? It opened a week early in the UK. This is obviously to help cut down on piracy. And as a result of that, a lot of those spoilers are out there and people were already learning about the set leaks and what was real and what was fake. And, a lot of it was actually pretty real. The film did pretty well critically. And that was actually one of the big things I think going for it compared to the first film, which did not do well critically, but this one did pretty well critically. It has a 91% on Rotten Tomatoes and a B+ cinema score. A lot of times these R-rated films maybe don't get the A marking when it comes to the cinema score, but a B+ isn't terrible. But it goes to show you that there is a little bit of a disconnect, I think, from the audience that went to go see it and the people that they interviewed, perhaps, because a lot of the people, again, had this been in theaters all the way, I think the cinema score would have probably been higher. It would have been a B, or it would have been like, it would have been like an A- or an A, I think. But, that didn't really happen. And so looking at very recent box office reports, unfortunately, a film that cost $185 million, not including the marketing budget, of which let's estimate another $100 million perhaps, it only grossed about $55.6 million in the United States and Canada, and another $110 million in other territories, putting it at a worldwide total of $166.5 million. So the movie most likely will not turn a profit theatrically or through home video sales or rentals. For Warner Brothers, I'm sure it will eventually find a way to turn itself a profit, at least a small margin. But where the film needed to succeed, and where I think it did succeed, was, of course, on HBO Max. According to Samba TV, and again, I don't know how reliable it is. Their metrics are very small, but they said 2.8 million households watched it on HBO Max in the first couple of days, which is something that is pretty big. It's like, I think the second highest viewing, or third highest of the year, I think. I think it was Suicide Squad did well, and then you had Mortal Kombat and Godzilla vs. Kong also did well. And so it's done well. It's just not the best. But at this point, it does feel like DC is going to be focusing a lot of their efforts going forward past 2022 into the HBO Max streaming department. And it's possible that with the Peacemaker series coming out this particular winter, I think it's in January, that we're going to be getting a bit of an extension into that world, which I don't know where that kind of lies with everything else. If it's not a sequel or a reboot or a prequel or whatever to the original film, we don't know. I don't know. So we're going to have to wait and see on that one. But at the end of the day, let me just give you guys my thoughts on the film. Pros is it was a lot of fun. I had a blast watching it. Yeah, it was a little slow in a few parts, but ultimately I found myself just really liking the character interactions. I liked the way that they were different from one another. I liked the challenges that Bloodsport and Peacemaker had, the kind of back and forth that they had together. I enjoyed Ratcatcher 2 immensely. I loved Polka Dot Man. He was definitely, a great character and an interesting one as well, because when you think about the way he's structured, the audience feels sorry for him, but they do that even though he's a bad guy. And that's what he wants. He wants you to feel sorry for him, even though he is effectively a monster, the monster that his mother made him. It's a very interesting take on it. One that I think requires a bit of extra paying attention to Milton's character, or not Milton, sorry, Polka Dot Man's character. But at it was definitely like, he was great. Ratcatcher 2 was awesome. Like I said, King Shark was fantastic. I was really pissed off that Rick Flag died. I was really pissed off. I knew it was going to happen. I knew about the leaks. I knew about Peacemaker. I still really liked John Cena in the role, so that's why I'm very conflicted about the upcoming Peacemaker show. We'll have to wait and see how that thing plays out. I don't quite know, but at the end of the day, it's a fun movie. It goes a little bit long in the tooth at times. It's definitely watchable, and it's definitely a good entry into the DCEU. And as always, I want to hear your thoughts and I want to hear your opinions on this. Let me know down in the comment section. If you're listening to this on iTunes, please leave us a review, or on Spotify or wherever. Subscribe, leave a review. I appreciate it. I'll talk to you guys later. Have yourself a great night. Thank you again, and peace out.